Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Go Hoops and God podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Guerra. Today's guest is a dear, dear friend, my friend, Nisi Baier. Nisi and I met at the University of San Francisco, what feels like a lifetime ago, many moons ago, many cities ago. Uh, and we've kept in touch ever since. And I actually got to see her pretty recently, which was lovely to catch up. So Nisi is a marriage and family therapist, and I know that she'll be able to share some of her wisdom from a therapist perspective. And, as usual on the podcast, we kind of think about Latina identity, Latinx identity, and the way in which each of us engages in culture, or perhaps some of us are not as exposed to Latinx culture and identity. But I'm super excited to have you here, Nisi. Do you want to share a little bit about yourself and kind of introduce yourself too?
Yeah,
Hi.
first I just want to thank you so much for having me on.
Of
I
course.
am really flattered to be among so many brilliant guests, and I am just so excited for you. The world needs to hear more of you and your thoughts, and so this is such a great project. Thank you. So I we'll start, I guess, with how you introduced me. I'm
Mhm.
a marriage and family therapist. I am licensed in Maryland and California. I work with adults and couples. It's been my main job, and my main focus for the past 10 years is doing mostly private practice. I've done some community mental health as well. um Sometimes, I don't know about you, but I'll go on Psychology Today or just some kind of directory, and I will just see therapists with a million different things they specialize in. They just seem to check all the boxes, and it can almost
Mhm.
feel overwhelming just
Mhm.
being everything to everyone, whether it's as a clinician or as a client even.
Totally.
I try to keep things simple with how I work. I sort of
Mhm.
have two things I specialize in: relationships, be they romantic relationships, friendships, or our relationship to ourselves, perhaps the juiciest of
Mhm.
relationships,
Oh yes.
and stress management. And maybe that means coping with a diagnosis like ADD or OCD or
Mhm.
LMNOP. Maybe it is just dealing with the stressors of everyday life.
Mhm.
Um, and of course, it goes without saying that relationships and stress go together. If I'm
Uh-huh.
working with a couple
Yeah.
and they're both working two jobs, they're both dealing with a kid who's having a tough time,
Right.
how can
It's a
the
strain.
stress stuff and
Yeah.
the relationship stuff not bleed into each other? And
Mhm.
so at the end of the day, I tend to just work with a lot of people who are doing the best they can with what they
Mhm.
have. And a lot of the work we do is just encouraging people to
Yeah.
not be so hard on themselves, because society's not really helping them in
Yeah.
accomplishing these things.
Totally.
And so that's a big, you know, thing I do, is just tell people not to be so hard on themselves. So I just save them
Yeah.
money. You don't need therapy. Just don't do that.
I love it. It's so true, and I think that finally, I would say, I don't know, in the last couple of years, definitely since the pandemic, people are finally recognizing the importance of mental health, the importance of therapy, understanding like how much one's mental health affects all the things, right? It's very hard to do a job or to study or to be a good partner, or to, if you're really having a personal crisis, it's like step one, relationship with self. I think that is really brilliant. That makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Awesome. Um, so let's see. So Nisi is a fantastic person. I remember meeting her when I was working at USF. And I was like, this girl, she's so cool. Like she always felt like a little too cool for me. I was like, is she gonna be my friend? I don't know. But I really like appreciated getting to know you over the years. And um yeah, we've had many, many laughs and adventures and things in the city of San Francisco for sure. But Nisi's originally from Chicago. So I would love if you could kind of share with our folks listening kind of your journey from Chicago to SF and now Baltimore, which is where Nisi resides now.
Yeah, absolutely. I will just note that the coolness ratio, I think you've got it a little bit reversed because I think you were the cool one.
Oh my gosh.
I hope you don't mind saying you're a few years older than me,
Yes,
and I
yeah.
was so eager to have like a cooler older friend when I was in
Oh.
college, and so finding this smart, brilliant person who was just as eager to be a cool city kid as I was. Yeah,
Yeah.
I made a good choice that day. I haven't always made good choices, but
Oh.
that day I did.
For
Um,
real. It's so wild. And I kind of touched on this in my conversation with another mutual friend, a very close friend of ours, Stephanie Farrows, who I also interviewed. Just like how unique and special that time period was of like being at USF, a very famous apartment. There was a shared apartment of a big group of our mutual friends all lived together for a time, and it was just so cool. It was so cool, and I know there's a lot of kind of nostalgia for the San Francisco that was, circa 2000s, 2010, etc. So there's that
yeah,
part too.
absolutely. And I take heart, even when I feel old and grouchy, I do take heart knowing that there are 1000% new cohorts of us who
Yes.
make just as questionable fashion choices, who are just as
Yeah.
precious and idealistic
Yeah.
and ironic
Exactly.
and obnoxious as we were. And so I just hope they
Yeah.
keep on coming and keep on going through the same uh,
Yeah.
life stages that we did.
Totally.
But yeah, so it's funny. I guess I could talk about my connection to the Great Lakes Midwest by talking about a Chicago cliche. I am actually technically not from Chicago. I am from Oak Park, Illinois, which is a
Oh.
delightful, charming, mid-size village that borders Chicago's west side. I grew up about a
Hmm.
block away from the city border, and there's a joke among Chicagoans and probably people of other cities that, maybe there's a little bit of gatekeeping or a little bit of checking others who might say they're from a place, but they're actually from the suburbs. Chicagoans are kind of notorious for being a little snooty about, well, no, you're from
Hmm.
Evanston,
Hmm.
you're from Naperville. I would say in my case, I am so proud and so grateful to be from Oak Park, Illinois, rather than
Hmm.
Chicago, Illinois, because the way schools are funded, the way that
Hmm.
Section 8 apartments are allocated, the
Hmm.
way that
Yeah.
just a person has the ability to access safe transit and everything else.
Yeah.
All of those things made a huge difference in my life.
Yeah.
They made a huge difference in my ACE score, which is kind of a social work term for adverse
Mm.
childhood experiences.
Wow.
I had a bit of a rough, urban, scrappy childhood, and I know that my friends in the Chicago school district, that was a lot
Hmm.
less funded than the Oak Park school district,
Hmm.
they had a rougher go of it. And so
Hmm.
I sort
Hmm.
of saw almost this like longitudinal study between me and some of the kids in the neighborhood,
Hmm.
and just those of us who went through this other school system in this kind of upper middle class progressive, mostly white, but a little diverse, kind of a town like Berkeley, kind of like
Hmm.
Evanston, like Ann
I
Arbor,
see.
these like,
Hmm.
mostly white, kind of liberal college town vibe places. That
Hmm.
was very much Oak Park. So that was the setting of my upbringing. I was kind of a
Cool.
latchkey kid. Got into a lot of trouble and hijinks and a few things with my older brothers that the
Mm.
statute of limitations probably don't care about.
Oh my God. You're so
Five
funny.
finger
Kids being
discounts at the
kids. Yeah.
candy store. Yeah.
Oh man.
So that was a great background though for my childhood, because I did
That's
get to
good.
grow up fast, and that suited me because
Mm.
I'm a really curious person,
Yeah.
and I think part of growing up also in such a diverse place like Chicago is It means not having a very clear cut, like, ethnic or cultural identity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think about you and, like, all the different parts of LA you've lived in and all the
Yeah.
cultural influences on you that may or may not be obvious.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. Yeah, thank you, Nisi, for sharing. That makes sense. Yeah. So two of my friends, two good friends of mine, they teach Spanish in Chicago in Chicago public schools. I think they're Spanish teachers, and some of the stuff they go through, the stories they tell, it's like, man, that's intense. It's intense. It's a lot. So I really appreciate what you said, that you appreciated growing up in Oak Park. So that's really awesome. And yeah, it's interesting. I mean, folks may not know. So in addition to like my background, which is Ecuadorian Guatemalan, on my mom's side of the family, one of my uncles is Italian from Italy. And on my dad's side, one of my uncles through marriage is from Iran. So I also had like this exposure to other cultures. I grew up in Koreatown, which is like the largest concentration of Koreans outside of Korea. So that's cool, and again, like you were saying, like I'm grateful that I went to schools that were pretty diverse because they were here in LA, the the kids that I went to school with were from all different backgrounds, and I'm glad for that, because it, you know, accepting people of different ethnicities, different religions, different practices was like it felt very obvious and felt very natural to me, because that's just what it is, right? Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. That's really cool. That's very, very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chicago. And so, as we kind of mentioned earlier, we met in San Francisco. So Nisi attended USF. Do you want to share a little bit about what led you to choose USF?
Location, location, location.
I love it. Yeah.
It's interesting because, yeah, I can talk more about this a little bit later, but I am fairly unchurched. My parents are not religious people, and I went to public schools, K through 12, and then I found
Hmm.
myself at a little Jesuit Catholic school.
Right.
I liked the idea of a small private school. I think I had a guidance counselor mention
Hmm.
financial aid wise. It was maybe a little better to go
Mm.
big in terms of aid and whatnot.
That's true. Yeah.
But yeah, I was just a little hippie who wanted to live in San Francisco, and I made it happen.
I love it.
And I cannot stress enough how well located USF
Yes,
is
it is. It is.
and
Yeah.
how great it felt to have this little oasis
Hmm.
in the midst of a very dense urban
Hmm.
area. So I both felt
Totally.
like I had that cozy college experience, but
Hmm.
also that it would have been a little hard for me to go from like a pretty urban area and like riding buses and
Right.
eating, different cuisines and just that like city kid stuff. If I went
Yeah.
to a college town and gone
In the
couch
middle of
hipping and all
nowhere.
that,
Yeah.
I bet I would have found that fun. I have some friends who had a great time doing that, but
Hmm.
I think I needed that backdrop for a
Yeah, the
variety of
city,
reasons.
city life.
Yeah.
Totally, totally, totally. Yeah. So for folks who don't know, University of San Francisco, it's located in the heart of San Francisco. It's a beautiful campus. Class sizes are small. It's becoming a plug for USF for people to apply. But anyway, um, it's a great Jesuit institution, and it is so close to everything. So like the typical thing was, you can walk to Haight Street from campus. You can walk around everywhere. The Panhandle's there, Golden Gate Park, all the cool stuff that happens in San Francisco. San Francisco, San Francisco has a lot of like citywide events, like Beta Breakers, SantaCon, like fun, crazy things that are like perfect for college students, right, and grad students. So it is a really fun place to be. Lots of adventure is
Yeah.
possible there. So
And in some ways, I'm sort of realizing now it was sort of the backdrop for some of my understanding of what it means to be immersed in like Mexican American or Chicano culture.
mhm, mhm.
in a uniquely Californian way. You know, I think
Right.
there's enough of us that we can discuss like regional
Totally.
differences
Oh yeah.
among other ways that
It's
like
different. Yeah.
presentation of identity or local cultures work. Because in
Mm-hmm.
Chicago, so my family, I have a very, very diverse family, but my own background is that my mom is Mexican American, mestiza. My
Mm-hmm.
dad is German American. Both sides of my family have been in the States for many, many generations.
Mm-hmm.
And I am, in many, many ways, though, disconnected a little bit from many of the stereotypical or knee-jerk kind of associations with Mexican culture.
Right. 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 Right.
A
Right.
lot of my family members, kids I played with, you know,
Yeah.
just a lot of people in my life growing up were either
Mm-hmm.
Puerto Rican or African American, or I
Mm-hmm.
went to school with a lot of white kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the things that we would associate with Mexican specific culture
Yes. Yes.
weren't as much around as much as just this kind of big sense of general kind
Mm-hmm.
of like diversity at like family gatherings or things like
Mm-hmm.
that. So I'm really grateful for that. But I
That's
also
awesome.
have found it interesting to think about what does or doesn't flag us. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's, yeah. I mean, that is kind of like the ultimate question is like, what makes someone Latina? Really, because and this is a conversation that I've had in a couple different spaces. It's like, okay, if we limit it to language, that's not fair because not everyone speaks Spanish, and Spanish is not the only language. It's a very colonial language on top of it, right? If we limit it to religion, no, that's not it either, right? So it's kind of like all these markers, everything has an exception, right? It's like,
mm,
oh, but it's like, well, but except this group, except that group. So it is really fascinating to think about. And it's so funny that you mentioned it. So growing up in California, truly, I didn't really meet a ton of Dominicans, Puerto Rican, right? Until I traveled, right? So I was much older. It was not until like college or grad school that I, went to Princeton for HTI or different, different things. And I was like, oh man, like this is a totally different vibe, or going to New York for the first time. I was like, oh my God, all my Ecuadorians, what's up? Like I didn't know, it's so different. When we think about California versus Midwest versus East Coast, Miami, Cuban, whatever, like those are very unique realities. So I'm really grateful that you've mentioned this. It
yeah,
makes sense.
I think,
Yeah,
yeah. And the way that, there can be wide definitions, I guess, of it, because I know
totally.
that, you know, food, I know can often be the marker for people. And obviously there are some memories of some of my family members cooking or some things that I enjoy cooking that
Mm-hmm.
just feel true and just grounded and
That's awesome. Yeah.
special. But also, like, I don't eat meat, and so
Um,
I'm missing out on what I remember to be really
right.
good
It can be very
food.
meat heavy. Yeah,
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 so even like cultural touch points like that, there's just, and
yeah.
that's my own choice. I purposefully am leaving myself out of that party, and I know it's a good,
That's okay.
fun
Yeah.
place, but yeah, finding ways to connect, because as you know, I love traveling through Latin America,
Yes.
and I think more than anything, what has felt true to me is I would like to express my cultural heritage
Mm-hmm.
via labor activism.
Love it.
There are some
Say more. That's so cool.
truly special and powerful and brave figures, both documented and undocumented in history,
Oh yeah.
specific to California, where I was born.
Yes.
I was
Yes.
born in SoCal,
Oh
but we
yes.
moved. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and so, yeah, whether it's United Farm Workers or Dolores Huerta, Cesar
Mm-hmm.
Chavez, all of the above, that as a business owner, I have choices as to the clientele that I advertise to
Mm.
or offer sliding scale fees to.
Mm-hmm.
As a community member, I can
Mm-hmm.
support, fellow workers on strike,
I love it.
and or just do everything I can to support the working people. And if that's how my culture expresses itself, that feels fine by me. I think I can do that
Yeah.
without feeling like a phony, hopefully.
I think that's amazing. And that's really beautiful. And it's so true, right? So all of these activists and activism that some of them seen and unseen, like you're saying, right? Like we've heard about Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez. I'm teaching Central American Studies right now. So different activists that, have really spoken out against like the mining companies, things like that, right? Globalization, all those things. So I really, really love that you mentioned it. Yeah, that's incredible. That's
Uh,
really, really awesome.
Well,
That's
I'll give
super cool.
a quick shout out to my husband. He's a really brilliant guy, very accomplished scientist.
Yes,
And
he
I
is.
think one of just the things I'm just absolute proudest of, though, is that he is a proud union member and that
Mm,
we are a union household.
I love
That's
it.
felt really, really exciting. And I wish
That's super cool.
I had more access to a healthcare workers union, but that's a little hard for us therapists. If any
Yeah.
listeners know of any ways for therapists to organize,
Hmm.
drop something in the comments, please.
I love it. Yeah, I'm part of the faculty union too, so I'm with you. That's really awesome. So speaking of travel, so Nisi and I, and actually several of our close friends, I noticed that as a pattern. Like we all really love to travel and have lived in a lot of different places or have lived abroad at some point or things like that, which I think is really cool. And so do you want to share a little bit as far as I know you've spent a good amount of time in Latin America, especially like in Chile and things like that. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh, we don't have enough time.
I
I'm
know,
just
right?
gonna
Oh,
gush
we need a whole different episode on this, on world travel.
my
Oh my gosh.
when I get excited and passionate, my California accent tends to come out. So I think we're going to hear a lot of
Let's do it. Yeah.
upticks at the end of sentences. So I wish I could say I've lived abroad for a really long time, but I'm grateful to say that I lived abroad for 3 beautiful months in Sydney, Australia. This was
Yeah.
when I was 25 and working for it was kind of like a travel agency, corporate concierge thing. I was in the travel industry for a lot of my 20s,
Hmm.
and I hustled and worked night shifts and kissed a lot of ass and found myself on a special work assignment to train an office of basically travel agents who'd be servicing like many countries and many languages
Hmm.
throughout Asia Pacific. So New Year's Eve, 25-year-old me, first time ever leaving the country. First
That's
stamp on my
right.
passport is
That's
a
right.
13-hour flight and the
You went
Southern
all you went
Hemisphere.
all in, friend. You went all in.
And I had a corporate apartment that was gorgeous with a beautiful view of the Opera House and the
I
Harbor
love it.
Bridge. And
Oh,
I was 25 and just loving my life.
so good.
And the Australians in particular are models for, I think, dealing with anxiety, which is not to
Oh,
obviously
interesting.
negate the anxiety experience of any Australians. I know quite a few neurotic, stressed out, brilliant
Oh my gosh.
Australians
That's so
who do
funny.
not fit the stereotype. But overall, I just noticed such a contrast to, even
Mm.
though our cultures are so similar,
Hmm.
they seemed so unbothered by a
I love it.
lot that no worries may
It's all good.
like a lot of teasing of friends, a lot of blowing off of steam. A little more drinking and gambling than is probably great for folks, but um, the just a general sense that like
Mm.
their shoulders aren't up to their ears, their hands aren't balled
Yeah.
into fists. There just was this like real tranquilo
Go with the flow.
sense,
Hmm. Hmm.
and that was a really nice thing to see, both from the point of view of like, oh wow, it is possible to just have fun and
To live
smile. And
differently.
yeah, and
Yep.
that got me thinking a little bit. It wasn't as though the next day I get home to back to the States and say I'm a therapist now, But it did
Mm.
plant some seeds for me to go to grad school, because I did think
Oh.
about not
Mhm.
just how can I help people be more chill, but
Mhm.
also what kind of life can I create for myself that will
Mhm.
allow me to be a bit of a bon vivant, to allow me some control over my
Love it.
schedule.
Yeah.
And so my becoming a therapist was partially, wanting to have a cool thing to do. Wanting to be there in a good, feel like I'm contributing, but also I just wanted to be my own boss and I wanted to make my
Yes.
own schedule.
Oh yes. Yeah.
And I am very clear with my clients, not that I'm like going to abandon them, but just that, hey, I'm generous with the time off I give myself. And
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
freedom and flexibility in my career is just a huge, huge, huge upside to doing this kind of work. And
Mhm.
Sydney's where like
Yeah.
that first trip made me realize that I need
It's
to
eye-opening.
prioritize travel. And yeah, and so I've been through like Europe and different parts of South America, and I'm happy to talk about, you know, some of those other
Yeah.
places. But Australia, I think, was the real pivotal, like, oh, I made a big life change following a
I love it.
formative experience. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah, absolutely. It's those moments that are very eye-opening and you're like, "You know what? I want to create a certain kind of life for myself." And it doesn't have to be this like stressed out, burnt out life that we're kind of sold here in the United States. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to, in other words, it doesn't have to be that way, right? It may be a process to get there, right? It's a process, it takes reflection, it takes planning, etc. You went to school, became a therapist, right? There was steps to make that happen. But I love what you said. It's like that exposure, that seeing what life could look like in in Australia and being like, huh, I want to kind of enjoy myself a little bit more, kind of take time for myself a little bit more. And we've talked about this, many times about living abroad and things like that. Like I had a very similar reaction. So as folks may know, because I talk about it every chance I get, every other damn day, I lived in Spain for 2.5 years. And it was very eye-opening in much the same way. It's like, wait a minute, families are hanging out, the elderly people are there having their little cerveza at 10 p.m. It's chill, it's cool. Like, this is a whole different energy. This is a whole different vibe. And I like it. I like this energy much better than the stress cases that we that we tend to be in the United States. So I've always kind of had that in the back of my mind for sure. Yeah, it's true. Like being your own boss, kind of like taking control of your own life. I think it's very beautiful and it's so important.
And
Yeah.
I know that in the Bay Area culture, especially, I
Mhm.
think, spending my 20s and such a big chunk of my 30s there and being around the kind of a lot of the therapy work I do, but also a
Yeah.
lot of the life I live tends to be, I tend to be surrounded professionally or personally by a lot of queer people, a lot of ethically non-monogamous people, a lot of
Right.
artists, types,
Yeah. It's
etc.
awesome. Yeah.
And so the Bay, being such an epicenter for folks who are sometimes in adorably amusing ways, sometimes in really like admirable, brave ways, trying to live meaningful, authentic,
Mhm.
special lives. That there's this
Mhm.
frantic energy to that place to try to have like
Mm.
special
Interesting.
experiences, unique
Interesting.
experiences. I think the FOMO
Hmm.
is hard
Oh,
in that place in
is intense.
ways.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and I could get caught up in that sometimes, that sort of wonder and whimsy of it
Mm.
all.
Mhm.
And that has been great for me in some ways in a spiritual sense of,
Mm.
just looking for the sublime and
Mm.
not to get too philosophical, but this
I
idea
love
of
it.
like,
Let's go for it.
well, you remember when I was much younger, I loved me some transcendentalism, and I
Oh
still
yeah.
do. And I think that there is just that desire of like, what's a pure experience, what's an authentic
Mhm.
experience, what's unique, and we get a little too in our heads about that sometimes.
Yeah.
I've seen people have revelations just like watching some birds in the sky
Mm.
And I've seen that same person maybe go to a festival, take a bunch of drugs, expect some insight, and it
Right.
feels hollow and empty. That as soon
Oh,
as we
yeah.
start to like formulate inspiration, meaning, as
Yeah.
soon as we start to,
Manufacture a certain, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, then we get into
Totally.
trouble. So we have to
Totally.
like be open to these moments of feeling
Mhm.
transcendent, of feeling inspiration, but
Yeah.
we can't force it, especially not through cliched means like going to the
Mhm.
sea lions at Fisherman's Wharf over the
Right.
years.
Right, right, right.
That's like provided more comfort sometimes than
Totally.
like a sound breathing seance
Yeah,
or
sound bath,
what.
like, right, right.
And I do love a sound bath, but I think the sound of the sea lions is just as soothing.
Much more melodic. Yeah. No, it's true. I get what you're saying in terms of like the sense of like trying to reach that high. Like always like looking for the high, looking for this epic, story to tell, that kind of thing. It's like, sometimes life is a lot just much more quiet than that, or simple, or kind of like, looking for those magic moments that are subtle, right? The subtlety of life, the little things. I think that can also be very beautiful. Yeah, it's not always like a fireworks explosion. It's something much more discreet, I think.
Absolutely
Cool.
agree.
I love it. So cool, Nisi. Oh my goodness. So, um, as we speak of journey and movement and cities, Nisi now lives in Baltimore. So, do you want to tell us a little bit as far as like how it's been, right? So from Chicago to Bay Area to Baltimore, I know we've talked a little bit that these are very different places.
Absolutely. And I think if I were maybe like pitching a TV show about my life, it would 1000% be like a situational workplace comedy or something along those lines. A drama would not
Oh my
suffice, but I think in said thing, I think it would probably be maybe like a network sitcom about like a city mouse turned into a country mouse,
god. I love it.
and what it means to be turning 40 and in some ways still kind of a wild child, in other ways on paper I'm a suburban housewife.
You are, DC. I hate to break it to you.
We can acknowledge this. The truth is the first step, acceptance. And so that feels good in its own way, because I think I was always, even in my more urban eras,
Hmm.
always, enjoying reading a book and
Yes.
trying to have a little backyard garden, and
Hmm.
just, trying to find, again, simple, straightforward ways to spend my time, in addition to like big epic trips or like fun nights out or things like that, just that balance. And so I am in, for a few reasons, a little bit more of the homesteading,
Hmm.
taking it easy. I go on field trips to the city now. I
I
don't
love
commute
it. Yeah.
in the city.
Right. Right.
And so living in Maryland, in a like suburban, rural, near Baltimore, but
Hmm.
also near DC, but
Hmm.
also in my own charming little town,
Yeah.
um, I've really, really grown to appreciate this region. And I think just some of the subtle differences in what
Hmm.
it's like to make friends out here, and
Hmm.
what it's like
Yeah.
to deal with like traffic, or how people discuss politics, or what it means to be able to just pop into New York out here, or another
Yeah.
state versus
It's cool.
California or Illinois, which,
Oh,
yeah, there's like Milwaukee, that's a little day trip, but this just feels like the East Coast feels like, um,
the geography is so different. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. And yeah, and so I think more than anything, for all these regions, the shtick, I guess, of said sitcom about my life would probably be Great Lakes Midwestern. Like my time in the Bay, my time here, all it's done is make me feel more Midwestern. And I know that, like,
Oh
right
wow.
now,
That's
again,
cool.
these regions, for every person who feels that they embody a region, there's like five people who could say that's all nonsense and stereotypes. And,
Yeah.
I've met like two nice Midwesterners and three mean ones. So what do we do with that?
Right.
But I guess at the end of the day, um, I love living in a place with hills and
Hmm.
nature and elevation and a lot of really smart people.
Hmm.
I have such smart, accomplished, quick, witty friends,
Hmm.
and
It's cool.
I
Hmm.
just feel cooler around them,
Hmm.
and that feels very DC. There's a real
Yeah.
sharpness to this area that
Yeah.
I really appreciate, and it keeps me
Hmm.
kind of sharp myself.
That's great. Yeah, I love that. No, it's so cool. It's so awesome. Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Nisi. That's really, really neat. Yeah, it is cool. It is cool to experience different regions of the country, and because each one has something to offer, like each one is different, and things like that. So that's really cool. Um,
Absolutely. And each one has
Yay.
its own dating scene from what I've
Oh,
come to understand from, you
certainly,
know,
certainly.
from clients and whatnot. Man, light a candle for the people of DC trying to find love.
Pray for their soulmates, right?
I
That's
know
so
that,
funny.
like, in LA, my
Oh,
understanding is
that's a
like,
different
what do
thing.
you
Yeah,
do? Who do you know? What
yeah.
do you drive? In DC, it's sort of like, will this person be embarrassing on my security clearance? Can I live with who they interned for? Um,
I love it. Congressman so and so is like saying da 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 da. Oh gosh, that's
yeah.
hilarious. That is
And
hilarious.
they act very bridge and tunnel about cities that are really nearby. Like Arlington, Alexandria are
Oh
right
no, yeah,
there. The district people act as though, like, you can literally walk over the bridge. I've done it many
that's
times
hilarious.
despite my fear of heights. And
That's
yeah,
hilarious.
so it's cute. It's a lot of smart people, and I wish them all luck in their romantic endeavors, but not too
That's
much luck
hilarious.
because I need clients, so I need them
Right,
to
right,
have
right. And then
just
come to me
enough.
with your woes. Exactly. Come to me with your love woes. Oh, that's so
The
funny.
relationship
Very, very House of
problems.
Cards. Oh my god.
Or they
I
could
love
just
that
come
show.
to me for premarital counseling. That's
That
always
too.
a good idea. Seriously, you
That
don't have
too.
to be in trouble, you all, to like do a little touch up before a big commitment or,
It's not a bad idea. Yeah, exactly.
absolutely.
So I had a revelation yesterday. Um, so apparently there was some nightclub that no longer allows fire signs, like people with a fire sign, into the club because it tends to be that they're the ones that cause chaos and fights in the club. I'm an Aries for everyone who may not know.
I'm a
But
Leo. That's me, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, Leo. Yes. Oh my, Nisi. How many times have we gone clubbing together? Oh my gosh.
But
A
wouldn't you say
thousand.
I'm Cancer Leo cusp, and maybe
Oh,
it's
that
I'm
could be why.
deluding
That could be why.
myself, but
That could be
yeah,
why.
I'm keeping the peace, except for when I'm not, and you
Except
remember
for when
those
you're not.
times.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. No, so Nisi and I had many fond memories of the Castro, specifically Badlands. That place was epic. Oh my gosh. So much fun. Anyway, but I was thinking, this goes back to dating. I was like, what if we had an app that was like fire signs only? What if it was like an astrology? No one steal my idea. I'm trademarking that right now. What if, what if there was an app for like, where certain like astrological signs could meet, and like if you go on there, like you have to be ready to embrace all that is, right? In whatever sign that is. I thought that would be really fun.
I think the graphics budget could easily go overboard because I think all the cute little
So good.
cartoons
Oh,
of
so good.
the
Yeah.
symbols and the signs, like, crashing against
Could go
each
crazy.
other.
Could go
Yeah,
crazy. Yeah.
absolutely. I've dated a lot of Scorpios, and from
Oh,
what
this
I
is Scorpio
understand,
season. Oh yes. Oh yes.
well, again, I may as well have a leather jacket and a motorcycle, from what I understand.
Basically, oh yeah, it's very hardcore. Um, that's so funny. Uh, oh man, this has been so good, friend. Um, as we kind of wrap up our conversation, I always ask folks, because I feel like we have wisdom to share. We have a lot of knowledge that we've gained, over the years about life. So I'm curious, like, what wisdom would you gain? What wisdom would you share with young people today? And or like, what would you tell your younger self if you could go back in time?
Yeah, I'll do a little bit of both.
Okay, perfect.
I think I guess I want to give a shout out to all of the eldest daughters.
Yep. Yep.
That isn't quite me, but maybe it is a little bit in spirit. I'm not literally, but I think I embody it a little bit. I just really just would give the advice of I think there's a hard line between honoring culture and being smothered by culture, and with having boundaries and expressing your needs and putting yourself first. I just know that's really,
Yes.
really hard and not always as simple as
Mm-hmm.
um, we say set boundaries, but I understand that that's not
Yeah.
culturally and or communication wise always really easy to do. And so I think just really normalizing, really validating that some folks, especially need to take up
Mm-hmm.
kind of a lot of room, a lot of space.
Mm-hmm.
And also that's an invitation for maybe like the
Yeah.
youngest son type who gets babied to like step up in some
Uh-huh.
ways. You know what I mean? Like, so that idea of just
Yeah.
thinking about, because sometimes I think we give a lot of generic advice, but we don't think
Mm-hmm.
about the context of who really needs it.
Yeah.
So yeah, in general, just I would tell anyone like, hey, you do you, enjoy yourself, stretch out, like be
Yeah.
selfish a little bit, but
Yeah.
especially that archetypal kind of eldest
Mm-hmm.
daughter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But to me, I think I would just encourage myself to shoot for contentment rather than happiness.
Mm.
I
Mm.
think that loss and setbacks and having flaws,
Mm-hmm.
those are normal and necessary. And
Yeah.
that in order to appreciate the divine or just the
Mm.
special or the bliss or the dopamine or whatever it is, we need that balance of
Mm-hmm.
disappointment and sadness and,
Mm-hmm.
just this expectation that only good things can happen, the expectation that we're going to achieve X, Y, and Z, and that's a formula to happiness.
Mm-hmm.
That's a setup. That's a scam. It's, statistically speaking, there are going to be times where we all have to take one for the team, that even if
Hmm.
we maybe we're going out for the
Yeah.
school play and we want the lead role and we're daydreaming about how much we want to be Sandy and Grace, it might be that some other girl in your class that you don't know that well, maybe
Mm-hmm.
her story and her narrative is a little more compelling than yours, and it's her time to be Sandy,
It's
it's not
okay.
your
Yeah.
time. Yeah,
Exactly.
and
Right.
that's fine, and maybe you'll really like bust ass at the next audition. Maybe it'll work,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it won't, but
Mm-hmm.
just it's worth it to keep trying, because that's just
Totally.
what we got to do. And I think like
Totally.
why I'm mentioning this is I think it would have like helped me avoid some like perfectionism and some shame in my life, that I think there's a tendency I think we all have, where when things are going bad, I think we assume that it's 100% our poor choices.
Mm-hmm.
And
What
I
did I
mean,
do
maybe
wrong? Yeah.
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 And I mean,
Yeah.
sure, we might contribute to it a little bit. There's obviously systemic things that
Sure.
contribute to what's going on.
Sure.
And also, it really just might be you drew the short straw. Sorry. One out of
Yeah.
every 100 trains are running late
Mm-hmm.
on this line, and you just
Mm-hmm.
so happen to catch that one. Whoops,2sorry.
Yeah.
But if the train is
Yeah.
late every week, that's a systemic problem. If the train is late every year, whoops, bad luck.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's so true. Perfectionism is a big thing. I think like overcoming
Yeah.
perfectionism, being kinder to yourself in general. And I agree with you, just like kind of this understanding that life is not perfect, but it is also can be very beautiful too, in the imperfection, right? Like, no, it's not perfect. All of us go through crap. Like everyone goes through crap, right? And sometimes people don't share it. Sometimes people don't advertise or share like all the things that they've gone through, but they have, right?
Yeah.
And so I really love that. I think that's a really great advice for young people, especially that you'll be okay. You're going to make it through. And also this sense that what is for you will be for you. Right. I think the play example was really good. Like, okay, maybe you didn't get the lead role in Grease, but you may be the next Maria on West Side Story. I don't know, right? Like we don't know. But again, like what's for you is for you. If it's meant to be, it's gonna come. It's gonna come. It might not be when you want it, but it may be later or but it'll happen. Yeah. No, I think that's amazing advice.
Yeah, and it'll
Amazing,
mean
amazing.
so much if it's hard won. Yeah.
Woo! Yes, 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 yes. That's so true. So true. Cool. Oh, thank you, Nisi. This was amazing.
Thank you.
This was the best. You were super awesome. So, folks, thank you for joining us today. This is Nisi Baier, my friend and amazing therapist. I'll be sure to tag her on this video once it is uploaded. Thank you for being here. Thank you to my listeners and subscribers. Again, this is the Gold Hoops and God podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Guerra. You can find this episode and other episodes wherever you listen to your podcast. We're on every major platform. And also you can watch a video of the interview on YouTube. And I have a Facebook page. We got it all. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nisi.
Thank you.
Bye.